Hello gamers, Genshin just dropped the Flins and ineffa banner on Twitter, and I thought we would do a bit of a banner review and go over some of the 4 stars, talk about Flins, talk about ineffa, and of course look at the weapon banner as well. How about we just start with Flins, right? So now that we're out of Nodcry, Flins is sort of the, quote-unquote worst lunar carries out of the bunch, but it's honestly kind of like a non-issue, only if you really care about really getting the most out of your primos or whatever. I think Flins is still an extremely relevant lunar character. He's still going to be very strong. I feel like Flins has some pretty good teams that are pretty like non-reliant on other characters. To compare to another lunar carry, I'm going to compare it to Nefer, but Nefer is a lot more reliant on Lauma for damage and also relatively reliant on Columbina, having more quality of life for Verdant Dews. Ineffa is obviously a big help to Flins, but it's mostly because Ineffa brings damage to the table, not necessarily due to like her buffing capabilities. In fact, you've probably heard that in some teams, ineffa is actually out damaging Flins, or at least doing like the same amount of damage. Ineffa is just one of the powerhouses of lunar charge. She's just really good on her own, and so when you slap her on a Flins team, they just work really well together. If you're looking for a lunar team to cover some of your lunar shill, I mean, we have Knuckle Duckle right now in Stygian, who is just probably one of the worst bosses to fight, honestly. Knuckle Duckle is so annoying to fight. If you're looking for a lunar team to just get it over with, if you got Columbina previously, you could go for Columbina ineffa core, or you could just go for the whole team, Flins, ineffa, Columbina. In fact, I'd probably recommend that if you got Columbina, because I'm not sure how much longer the Columbina ineffa core is going to hold up in, endgame content like Stygian. It's still okay right now, but I feel like in the future, just having Columbina ineffa is not gonna cut it. So having the full lunar package, the full Flins, Columbina ineffa team with like Sucrose, it's kind of what you're looking for. And obviously, I think this is a great time to get him if you're trying to get through Knuckle Duckle. We can talk about ineffa too. As you can see from my reaction image that I use on like all my videos, I'm a really big fan of ineffa. I'm pretty biased. I think the shield is really comfy. She does a ton of damage. I don't know, I just really like using her. She's really comfy. I don't have much to say about her aside from that. Yeah, as of right now, the Columbina ineffa core is still okay. I can't in good conscience recommend only getting Columbina and ineffa right now. It is nice, but if you really are gonna get Columbina ineffa, I feel like you should probably be aiming for like Columbina ineffa and Flins. And if you can't get all of them, then maybe, you just tank the fact that you won't be able to do Knuckle Duckle on this Stygian rotation and save for other Snezhnayan characters that are going to release. I'm pretty sure the Tsaritsa is going to come up pretty soon. And, she's probably going to be really powerful. So, just putting that out there, just be mindful of your decisions, right? But if you really do think that you need a lunar team and you value having a lunar team on your account, having a Flins and ineffa Columbina team is going to be perfectly fine. I feel like there's probably going to be some people saying like, Nefer is better, Zabai is better. Zabai, Linnea is like definitely the best, but they really are like in a pretty close group with one another. Yeah, let's talk about the 4 stars now. First we have Lanyan, and Lanyan is a pretty interesting character. I'm going to relate it to the banners, but she does give an EM buff at C4. It's only 60 EM, but it is an EM buff. She has a very nice shield, but if you're using her in like a team with ineffa, it's kind of redundant. She can hold VV, right? She is an animal character. That's one of the biggest pros of being an animal character, is you can use VV. That's mostly it, right? So if you don't have her C4, she is just kind of like a big shield bot, combined with the fact that she can hold VV and Red Shred, and then at C4 you get some EM buffs. I would say she's definitely not bad. I'd say she's probably a little bit more on the underrated side. I think specifically in the case for like lunar teams, I really do not think Flins even needs a shielder in the first place. Like, he already has ineffa. He definitely doesn't need another shielder. Sucrose is free, right? And she can already hold VV, plus giving EM buff to the entire team, a much larger EM buff Then Lanyan, you know, I feel like she's a little bit of a dead slot on this banner, but I can definitely see her being used outside of these teams. I can even see her being used in a Nefer team. Those teams tend to lack sustain or defensive utility. Her giving an EM buff at C4, which Nefer really appreciates, is nice. And of course the shield. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm kind of just grasping at straws here. I'm trying to say the nicest things I can, but overall I don't think she works like crazy well on this banner. Then we have Iansan. I think Iansan's a really interesting one. So Iansan is obviously just like a great character in general. Cons are really good. You know, she does technically work for flins because flins is an attack scaler, so she will increase the damage of flins. Whether or not flins inside of his mini burst counts as like movement, I'm not sure, but you know, once you have C4 Iansan, you can do a lot of weird stuff with like dashing around to keep the buff up and whatever, and makes Iansan a lot more viable in teams that aren't incredibly movement-based, like in Awika Varesa teams. I don't really know what else to say about Iansan. She's just like a fantastic character, great in so many teams. I'd say for specifically this, you know, this team, I probably would not go out of my way to get Iansan cons specifically for a Flins team. I don't really think that's something that's completely worth doing. You could just do Bennett as well. Bennett is also an attack buffer. Relating it to the banner, I'd say Iansan is good and can definitely work with Flins. She's not like the best fit for Flins, but you know, she will work. She is an attack buffer, so you know, pretty nice. And of course, very nice if you're just trying to get Iansan cons. Like even now, right now, I'm considering pulling on this banner to maybe snipe some Iansan cons. I have her at C3, so would be nice to maybe get her C5 or C6. And then we have Ino. Now, I am like one of the biggest Ino haters, like in terms of her gameplay. I think she's a really funny and like fantastic character, but in terms of gameplay, I cannot stand playing her. Now, most of my impressions of her came from her gameplay at C0. I had her at C0 for a very long time until I got Columbina. Once I got Columbina, I basically never touched Ino again. One thing that I always say about Ino, which I think is really funny to say, is that at C6, she's just genuinely a better buffer. Specifically, she has better buffs than Columbina, right? Because if you think about it, Columbina's only real buff that she gives to other characters is lunar damage bonus. And that's 40% at crowned Columbina burst talent. I know at C6 gives 35% lunar damage bonus, as well as giving 80 EM from her C1, which is just objectively better. But, of course, what Columbina brings to the table is more consistent Hydra application and just, like, better ease of use. And Columbina just does way more damage, right? Ino just kind of, like, tickles enemies, but Columbina does a ton of personal damage herself, and that is what actually separates her. But I just think it's always funny to talk about how when it comes to both of their supportive capabilities, technically Ino's is like better, but Columbina of course still just like gaps Ino. You know, it's not a bad place to be. Ino at C6 is still like pretty great in these teams. It's just that, you know, Columbina simply does more damage than her. But if you don't have Columbina, I'd say in Flins and ineffa teams specifically, not having Columbina and using Ino instead is much easier to get away with. Now, you can argue with me if you think otherwise, but I'd say relative to a character like Nefer, I feel like Nefer is a lot more reliant on a character like Columbina. I'm telling you, the extra verdant dues that you get from Columbina, using Columbina's burst in Nefer teams, is once you have it, it is so hard to go without it. Every time I've used Columbina with Zabai instead, and I've used my Nefer team with Ino, it just feels so terrible. But I don't actually own Flins, so I can't really speak on the behalf of Flins users, but if I had to guess, based on gameplay, based on what I've played with him in like trials and stuff, I'd say he's a lot less reliant on having Columbina in the team. But you know, maybe I'm completely wrong on that. I'm just making some like educated guesses here. Yeah, overall, like I'm actually not that mad about these 4 stars. Like, I think Lanyan is a little bit out of place here. She's also even though she's relatively newer, she is a Liyue 4-star, which means she's going to be available during Lantern Rite, and you can just select her. So if your concern is just getting like a single copy of her, then obviously you can just wait for Lantern Rite to come around. If you are trying to look to get cons for her, you know, I don't really see her relation to this banner like that much, especially if you just have Sucrose instead. I guess you can use Lanyan if you want to use Sucrose somewhere else, and that's definitely something you can consider. And then there's Iansan, like I said, can work with Flins. Technically not really like insanely synergistic with each other, but you know, she is an attack buffer and Flins likes attack, so it can work. You might need to do some movement shenanigans on Flins, but it can work. And overall, Iansan is just a fantastic character in many teams, so especially very like meta relevant teams as well. And then Ino, definitely not a bad character by any means, but very clearly superseded by Columbina, and also I know can be a little bit annoying to play, a little bit annoying to work with. All right, now let's talk about the weapon banner. So now when it comes to Flynn's signature weapon, I'm pretty sure his C1 is better than getting his R1 for like early vertical. However, if you already have Flynn's C1, I think now at that point, it's better to get his R1 instead of getting his C2. I still think it's better to use like the Nodcry craftable and then get C1, but once you're at C1, then it's probably better to look for R1 instead of a C2. Now, I did do a little bit of research into this not too long ago when I was helping someone else vertically invest into their Flins team. I'm pretty sure some of the best early vertical choices you can make for a Flins team is either getting Ineffa's Sig or getting Ineffa's C1. And this is because the thing about Flynn's Sig is that it does increase like lunar charge damage, but it only increases the lunar charge damage of the equipping character. Ineffa's Sig gives you, I'll put it on screen, it gives attack percent to the wielder, so Ineffa, but it also gives 40% lunar charge damage to the entire team. And this is going to include Ineffa, this is going to include Flynn's, this is going to include Columbina. So that is a massive increase. Her C1 is basically the same thing, except instead of 40%, it's 50%. I think if you are pulling on this banner, you have both Ineffa and Flynn's, you're probably hoping to hit Ineffa's Sig because it is just objectively one of the best early investment options you can make in a Flynn's team. But the Flynn Sig is definitely not bad, and also it just looks really cool. I think that it's a very nice looking weapon, whereas, you know, I mean, Ineffa's weapon's not a bad looking weapon, but you know, it just looks like a big pizza cutter. And then we can move on to the 4-star weapons. So we have Stringless. Still think Stringless has some good uses on official, maybe like Auroron. You know, there's characters that can use Stringless. The refinements are really good on it. I think it was a lot better back in the Dendro days with like Aggravate and stuff, where the EM was actually like very, very good, but using on official all the time, right? And official is just like still very relevant in a lot of teams these days due to like Hex. Then we have the Flute. I haven't seen anyone talk about this weapon in forever. I think I'm just gonna kind of like go past it. I think it's not really worth talking about. Same with the Eye of Perception. I'll just say that right now. I'm not really gonna talk about any of these. Although I can say something about this maybe being used on characters like Nicole, because I think it's attack percent. But aside from that, you know, anyways, Fab Lance, one of my favorite weapons in the game. I think I've said this in another banner review before, but Favonius Lance. Dude, I swear, it always feels like you need another Favonius Lance. There's always some polearm character that really wants it, and I never have enough. So having an extra copy of a Favonius Lance never hurts, and the refinements are also quite good, just allowing you to generate energy more often. So yeah, I really feel like you cannot go wrong with this weapon, unless of course you already have like 10 R5 Fav Lances, then you know you're fine. But fantastic weapon to have in almost like all scenarios on all accounts. And lastly, we have Favonius Greatsword. I don't want to say it's like a bad weapon. I've used it on like Ino a few times, probably used it on like Beto occasionally. You know, if for some reason you're running like Beto as like a solo Electro in a Stellar team, then maybe Favonius Greatsword is what you're looking for, because she'll need a lot of energy there. It looks pretty good on Noelle, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just like a little bit too niche, but it's not bad where, you know, it's used. Like if you don't have that event weapon for Ino, then obviously Favonius Greatsword is probably your next best option for Ino. Overall, like, better than I expected, to be honest. Like, Ino is definitely a considerable character with Constellations, despite her gameplay issues. Lanyan can be a little bit of a dud, but can also kind of be a way to like free up your sucrose while also providing like defensive utility. Iansan just is a generally really good character, can technically work with flins because she's an attack buffer. And for the weapons, it's like, you know, both of these are going to be pretty good on flins teams. I think if you're, you know, full C0 R0 on your flins team, you're definitely wanting to get the pizza cutter first. It just being a good weapon on ineffa, increasing her attack percent, increasing her personal damage. And she already does a lot of damage, so it's just very good. And these 4 stars, you know, I mean, you know, these two kind of duds. Eye perceptions, maybe like, you know, extremely niche, but like, you know, maybe it can be used on the Cole, maybe it can be used on Cloud Retainer, even Lanyan herself. She's an attack scaler, but you know, you probably want her on like Thrilling Tales instead or something like that. And Favonia's Greatsword I also think is just kind of niche, but you know, it's good on Ino. Could be good on Beto and Stellar teams. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say for now. If you made it this far into the video, you are a real one, and I will see you around. Bye bye.